Asking an English professor to choose a favorite book is almost an impossible task. So I thought I would recommend a book that I read recently that I thought was really interesting because it made me think. That book is American Wife by Curtis Sittenfeld. Curtis Sittenfeld is a new contemporary American woman author whose writing has been praised for clarity and for being unpretentious, but she also does something really interesting with all of her books, and that is that she'll take a book genre that's familiar to us and do something different with it. For example, her first book, Prep, is basically a boarding school story, but it becomes something else entirely in her hands. A little bit like Holden Caulfield from Catcher in the Rye, but even more excruciatingly funny to read because it makes you think about high school, but also it brings up a lot of important class issues. American Wife is another book that continues to surprise. And in order to illustrate that, I'm going to read just the first page so you can see what she does in this that is really interesting. This is from the prologue, and the date of the prologue is June 2007, the White House. Have I made terrible mistakes? In bed beside me, my husband sleeps, his breathing deep and steady. Early in our marriage, really in the first weeks, when he snored, I'd say his name out loud. And when he responded, I'd apologetically request that he turn on his side. But it didn't take long for him to convey that he'd prefer if I simply shoved him. No conversation was necessary, and that he didn't want to be awakened. Just roll me over, he said, and grinned. Give me a good, hard push. This felt rude, but I learned to do it. Tonight, though, he isn't snoring, so I can't blame my insomnia on him. Nor can I blame the temperature of the room, 67 degrees during the night, 70 degrees during the day, when neither of us spends almost any time here. A white noise machine hums discreetly from its perch on the shelf, and the shades and draperies are drawn to keep us in thick darkness. There are always in our lives now security concerns, but these have become routine, and more than once I've thought that we must be far safer than a typical suburban middle-class couple. They have a burglar alarm or perhaps a Jack Russell Terrier, a spotlight at one exterior corner of the house, and we have snipers and helicopters, armored cars, rocket launchers, and sharpshooters on the roof. The risks for us are greater, yes, but the level of protection is incomparable, absurd at times. As with so much else, I tell myself that it is our positions that are being deferred to. We are simply symbols. Who we are as individuals hardly matters. It would embarrass me otherwise to think of all the expense and effort put forth on our behalf. If not us, I repeat to myself, then others who would play the same role. For several nights, I've had trouble sleeping. It's not going to bed in the first place that's the challenge. I feel all the normal stages of weariness, the lack of focus that becomes more pronounced with each half hour past 10 o'clock. And when I climb beneath the covers, usually a little after 11, sometimes my husband is still in the bathroom or looking over a last few papers, talking to me from across the room, and I drift away. When he comes to bed, he cradles me. I rise back from the sea of sleep. We say, I love you to each other, and in the blurriness of this moment, I believe that something essential is still ours, that our bodies in darkness are what's true, and most everything else, the exposure and the obligations and the controversies, is fabrication and pretense. When I wake around 2, however, I fear the reverse. And I'm skipping ahead just to end that. There's so much I've experienced that I never could have imagined. I ask, did I jeopardize my husband's presidency today? Did I do something I should have done years ago? Or perhaps I did both, and that's the problem. I lead a life in opposition to itself. If that sounds a little bit familiar, it's not surprising, because what American Wife is a fictionalized biography of Laura Bush. In the book, however, the names are changed, and the basis in Laura Bush's life is actually quite loose. Some of the events which Sittenfeld researched are parallel to Laura Bush's life. For each of the 4 sections of the book, there's actually a main event which ties in exactly with something that happened to Laura Bush. However, What she does in the book is to use those events to offer us an exploration of how we become the people that we become, how events shape us for the rest of our lives, and also, in a bigger way, how we define what a public person is, how the media plays a role in that, and what the dynamic is between power and relationships. So the book is also interesting, I think, for a Wisconsin audience because as well as changing the names, Sittenfeld changed the setting of the book. So the Laura Bush character, who's actually called Alice Lindgren in the book, is from Riley, Wisconsin. And she goes to school at the UW-Madison, which is where she's living and working as a librarian, when she meets a sort of ne'er-do-well son of a really powerful political family named Charlie Blackwell. Charlie Blackwell's family fortune is been raised by sausages, another sort of Wisconsin-esque moment there. And the part that I got the biggest kick out of was that the family compound of this wealthy family, instead of being in Crawford, Texas, is actually in Door County. So the book progresses in a way that you would expect, but it makes you think about a lot of different things. As well as being thought-provoking, it's actually a really good read. And with the end of the semester coming up, I would really recommend this book as one that would fit well on a lot of fun summer reading lists.